It is the sentence of this court that first of all you be committed to the Michigan Department of Corrections, serve a minimum of 2 years on the felony firearm. After that, you will serve 37 years to a minimum of 100 years on the second-degree murder. Concurrent to those, you'll serve 20 years to 80 years on the carjacking and 3 to 5 years on the carrying a concealed weapon.
Is asking the judge presiding over his sex crimes case to throw out evidence. This is the case where he faces more than 60 counts of sex.
In a shocking twist, Diddy allegedly attacked a judge moments after being handed a death penalty, sparking chaos and raising questions about justice, power, and the limits of the law. This dramatic confrontation, steeped in controversy and speculation, has ignited a firestorm of debate about the integrity of the courtroom, the role of media in shaping public opinion, and the enduring relevance of capital punishment in a modern society grappling with its own contradictions. As the details unfold, the incident serves as a mirror to the deeper tensions within the legal system and the human emotions that often drive its most high-profile cases. The scenario, though fictional, is rooted in a real-world tension, the collision between the rule of law and the raw, unfiltered anger that can erupt in the face of perceived injustice. If Diddy, a figure synonymous with charisma, influence, and controversy, were to confront a judge after being sentenced to death, a punishment that has long been a lightning rod for debate, the implications would be staggering. Such an act would not only challenge the legitimacy of the legal process, but also force society to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of justice itself. Could a death penalty meant to serve as a final deterrent instead become a catalyst for violence? Could the very system designed to uphold fairness become a stage for its own collapse? These are the questions that linger in the aftermath of a hypothetical yet chilling scenario. At the heart of this imagined conflict lies the principle of judicial independence, a cornerstone of democracy that ensures courts remain impartial and protected from external pressures. If Diddy were to assault a judge, the immediate legal consequences would be severe. Attacking a judicial officer is not just a crime, it is an act that undermines the entire foundation of the legal system. In many jurisdictions, such an attack could be classified as attempted murder or a felony assault, carrying penalties that would far exceed
what's going on back there. For me reading the lawsuit, that's when I put two and two together, like, wow, this was the freak off. But it made a lot of sense. You know, it was one specific time we was in Las Vegas, and it was just me and Puff. And he had the Caesars suite, and I had the room down the hall. And he called me, he said, yo, what's up? I said, oh, yo, ain't nice, what you doing? I said, nothing, I'm in the room, I'm chilling, what's up, what you need?
Any punishment the judge could impose. Yes, the gravity of the act would extend beyond the courtroom. It would signal a breakdown in the trust between the public and the institutions meant to serve them. If a defendant, even one as high profile as Diddy, could bypass legal safeguards to retaliate against a judge, what does that say about the safety of the judiciary? What does it say about the system's ability to protect its own? This hypothetical incident would also reignite debates about the death penalty itself. Proponents of capital punishment argue that it serves as a necessary punishment for the most heinous crimes, a final retribution that reflects the severity of the offense. Critics, however, contend that the death penalty is a flawed system prone to error, disproportionately applied, and a tool for political or social control. If a death sentence were to provoke an act of violence, it would further fuel the argument that the punishment itself is a destabilizing force. The question would then arise, is the death penalty a justifiable form of justice, or does it create a cycle of vengeance that risks escalating into chaos? The attack on the judge would not only highlight the emotional toll of such a sentence, but also underscore the potential for the legal system to become a battleground for its own principles. Beyond the legal and ethical dilemmas, the public's reaction to such an event would be polarized. For some, the attack might be seen as a justified act of defiance against a system that has failed to deliver justice. If the death penalty was perceived as excessive or unjust, a violent response could be framed as a necessary confrontation with a flawed process. This perspective would resonate with those who believe that the law should be accessible, fair, and responsive to the humanity of those involved. However, for others, the attack would be a stark reminder of the dangers of allowing personal grievances to override the rule of law. The media, ever the arbiter of public discourse, would play a pivotal role in shaping these narratives.
Testifying at trial. Now, at the last hearing, the judge ruled that the victims 2, 3, and 4 can testify under pseudonyms. The defense says that they object to particularly victim 3 and victim 4. Now, as why they don't object to victim 2, that's unclear. That portion was redacted in their filing to the judge. But it looks like for now that victim 2, 3, and 4 will continue on testifying under a pseudonym. What that pseudonym will be, that's a wait and see. But
usually it could be Jane Doe.
Jane Doe, yeah.
And victim 1, we believe, is going to reveal her name. Again, we believe that to be Cassandra Ventura. And there's a lot of reasons why alleged victims would want to proceed anonymously. You know, they're worried about harassment. They're worried about their safety,
and
humiliation.
if some are like possibly known figures who
Right.
have gone on podcasts and talked
Yeah.
about their time with the defendant, then I can understand why they'd want to go under a
Absolutely.
pseudonym too. And Jesse, yeah, one more thing I do want to mention is that there was a moment in court today where there were issues coming up just about the indictment. Specifically,
Sensationalized coverage could elevate the incident into a cultural spectacle, overshadowing the legal merits of the case and reducing it to a story of power, revenge, and controversy. In doing so, the media might inadvertently distort the conversation, turning a legal debate into a spectacle that prioritizes drama over justice. The broader implications of such an event would extend far beyond the courtroom. It would force society to reckon with the psychological and social dimensions of the death. Penalty studies have shown that the threat of capital punishment can create a climate of fear and hostility, not just for the accused, but for the entire legal system. Judges, jurors, and even witnesses may feel the weight of their role in a case that could result in a life sentence or death. This tension is not hypothetical. It has real-world consequences. In cases where the death penalty is at stake, the pressure to make the right decision can be immense, leading to errors, biases, and in extreme cases, violence. The attack on the judge would serve as a grim reminder that the death penalty is not just a legal verdict, but a volatile force that can ripple through the lives of everyone involved. Moreover, the incident would reignite discussions about the need for greater protections for legal officials. If a judge or jury member is threatened or attacked, it raises urgent questions about the security measures in place to safeguard the judiciary. High-profile cases, the risk of retaliation is often higher. Yet the resources allocated to protect legal personnel may not be sufficient. This hypothetical attack would demand a reevaluation of how the legal system balances the need for security with the principles of due process. It would also prompt a conversation about the role of the public in holding the judiciary accountable. Should citizens have a voice in shaping the conditions under which judges operate, or is the separation of powers a safeguard that must remain intact? At the same time, the scenario would challenge the narrative of
Explain what coercion is under the law applicable to this case. Rather, she will explain the concept of coercive control as understood within academic literature and within the practice of psychology. Throughout her testimony, Dr. Hughes will make clear that the terms she uses and the concepts she explains are all used within the field of psychology and are not legal terms or definitions. The reason that's important is because the defense objected to this. And in one of their filings, they said, Hughes also proposes to testify about what coercion means in the context of her discussion of the concept of coercive control. And her definition is different from the legal definition. According to Hughes, coercive tactics can include not just violence and threats, but a variety of other subtle tactics, including ostensibly positive behavior such as rewards, positivity, affection, normalcy, which can create emotional attachment and psychological dependency. According to her, anything counts. That's what the defense said. And then Combs provides a specific example in one of
Diddy as a figure of influence and power. If he were to take such a drastic action, it would force a reckoning with his public persona. For years, Diddy has been a symbol of both cultural success and controversy, a man whose life has been shaped by the intersection of art, business, and legal challenges. An attack on a judge would not only amplify the drama of his public life, but also raise questions about the limits of his power. Could a man with such influence and resources be so driven by anger that he would risk everything to retaliate against a legal system that has denied him the outcome he sought? The answer would depend on the context of the case, the nature of his grievances, and the broader societal forces at play. But regardless of the specifics, the act would serve as a reminder that power, even when wielded by the most prominent individuals, is not immune to the human emotions that drive conflict. Ultimately, this hypothetical scenario is a reflection of the complex interplay between justice, power, and the human condition. It forces us to confront the flaws and strengths of the legal system, the role of media in shaping public perception, and the enduring debate over the death penalty. Whether or not such an event ever occurs, the questions it raises are ones that society must continue to grapple with. The legal system is not a perfect institution, and it is not immune to the passions and prejudices of those who navigate it, but it remains a vital mechanism for ensuring that justice, however imperfect, is pursued with a sense of responsibility and fairness. The attack on a judge, real or imagined, is a stark reminder that the pursuit of justice is as much about protecting the system as it is about serving those within it. Diddy's shocking outburst after a death penalty ruling has sent shockwaves through the legal world. The moment he turned on the judge, the courtroom erupted. This is the story behind the chaos. The courtroom had been a battlefield of tension for weeks, with every word exchanged between Diddy and the judge carrying the...
The jury will see this, whether or not a jury can believe that that equates to sex trafficking or just, you know, alleged assault is two different things, and I guess we'll see once trial comes.
It's a really important piece of evidence. Okay, so now I want to get into expert testimony, and this is important, and I'm going to lay this out again, and then we'll talk about it. So the next part that came up was about the testimony of prosecution witness Dr. Dawn Hughes. We've discussed her before. She is a clinical and forensic psychologist who actually testified, by the way, in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. The defense objected to her testimony. In fact, here's how the prosecution described what her anticipated testimony would be like, and this is from a recent filing. The following includes the anticipated opinions the government expects Dr. Hughes will offer regarding sexual abuse and victim responses to sexual abuse, coercive control, coping strategies during and in relation to sexual abuse, delayed disclosure and memory of sexual abuse, all important to understand maybe why the alleged victims did or did not do what they did in this case. And it went on to say that the government...
weight of a life sentence. The judge, a seasoned jurist known for his unyielding stance on justice, had just delivered his verdict. Diddy would face the death penalty for his crimes. The announcement hung in the air like a thunderclap, leaving the room in stunned silence. But the silence didn't last long. Diddy, who had spent the last hour in a state of controlled fury, broke it with a sudden violent outburst. He lunged at the judge, shouting accusations and threats that left the courtroom in disarray. The guards had to intervene, restraining him as the judge's face turned red with anger. It was a moment that would be etched into history, a clash of power, law, and recklessness. But to understand why this moment unfolded, one must look beyond the courtroom. Diddy's case was not just a legal proceeding. It was a collision of his criminal empire, the justice system, and the public's polarized view of him. For years, Diddy had been a figure of controversy, a man whose name was synonymous with excess, influence, and scandal. His legal troubles began years ago with charges of drug trafficking, tax evasion, and violent altercations that had already landed him in prison multiple times. Each time, he managed to avoid the death penalty, thanks to plea deals, political maneuvering, and a legal team that seemed to have an uncanny ability to navigate the system. But this time was different. The charges were more severe, the evidence more damning, and the jury's verdict more definitive. The case against Diddy was built on a foundation of evidence that left little room for doubt. Prosecutors presented testimony from witnesses who described his violent behavior, his involvement in organized crime, and his disregard for the law. There were records of past convictions, including a 2018 incident where he was found guilty of assault after a confrontation with a rival. The court had already deemed him a danger to society, and the death penalty was seen as the only way to ensure he could never pose a threat again.
The QR code on screen. Something came up today about a defense, right? Something... the swinger defense?
Yeah.
Is that give us an idea of, you talked about consensual sexual relations, which I think is going to be their main argument, that all of this was on the up and up, but what is the swinger defense exactly, if I'm understanding correctly?
Yeah. It seems like that was something that Mark Agnifilo just kind of put out there, really.
Okay.
It was when the judge was addressing the motion to preclude evidence, which the judge did grant. And this was a government motion, by the way. And it was about other couples who, you know, bring in escorts into their private endeavors. And the defense says, though, that it's relevant just about the intent of this. And so Mark Agnifilo was making the argument that Combs, the defendant, might think it's appropriate to partake in this type of lifestyle because other people do, other swingers do. I remember, covering this case. We all have covered this case so much, and I remember asking one of our legal analysts, like, is sex on trial here? But it seems like
Diddy's legal team had fought tirelessly to prevent the verdict, arguing that the death penalty was an outdated and flawed system and that he deserved life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the judge had ruled against them, citing the severity of the crimes and the need for deterrence. Diddy, however, had never been one to accept defeat gracefully. His public persona was a masterclass in defiance, a man who thrived on controversy and used every opportunity to assert his will. In the weeks leading up to the trial, he had made no secret of his disdain for the legal system, calling it a tool of the powerful and a farce designed to silence those who challenge the status quo. His comments were often met with skepticism, dismissed as the rhetoric of a man who had spent his life in the spotlight. But now, as the verdict was delivered, his frustration boiled over. The judge's words had been clear. This is not a case of personal vendetta, Diddy. This is about the law, and the law has spoken. The judge's tone was firm, his voice steady, but the room felt charged with an unspoken tension. Diddy's reaction was immediate. He stood, his face contorted with anger, and shouted, "You don't get to decide my fate. You're just another pawn in their game." The judge, undeterred, responded with a cold stare, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm not here to play your games. I'm here to enforce the law." The moment was explosive, but it wasn't the first time Diddy had crossed lines in court. His history of confrontations with judges and prosecutors was well documented, though many of his outbursts had been dismissed as the theatrics of a man who had long since mastered the art of self-promotion. Yet, this time, the gravity of the situation was undeniable. The death penalty was a rare and extreme measure, and its use in Diddy's case was a signal that the court believed he posed an irreparable threat. But for Diddy, the death penalty was not just...
Were there for him.
Yeah, so Diddy just walked into the courtroom like he normally does. He hugged all of his attorneys. He, dabbed up Mark Agnifilo. I think he was kind of searching in the gallery to see if he had family there, because when court had first started, nobody was there from his family. And I think he kind of looks forward, and I'm just speculating here, obviously I'm not in his mind, but I think he looks for people, especially his mom, to be inside that courtroom in the gallery. But today it was just Justin Combs all by himself. I think in the moment when he had first walked into the courtroom, it was a little bit after it had started, he kind of was like clearing his throat. I don't know if it was because he actually had to clear his throat, or if it was to get his father's attention, just to let him know that he is here.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but Diddy did turn around a couple of times. I don't know if it was to see if more of his family came in, or just to kind of like check in with Justin during that. But he seems to always kind of be more excited to see his family inside that courtroom. But as far as the attorneys go, it was the usual bunch: Mark Agnifilo, Tenny Garagos.
A legal verdict. It was a personal affront. He had spent years navigating the legal system, leveraging his wealth and connections to avoid the harshest punishments. The idea that he would now be faced with the ultimate consequence of his actions was a blow that he could not contain. His outburst was not just a reaction to the verdict. It was a culmination of years of frustration, a refusal to accept that the system he had once manipulated would now turn against him. The courtroom erupted in chaos as guards moved to restrain him, but Diddy's words had already spread like wildfire. His accusations were not just directed at the judge, but at the entire system that had brought him to this moment. "You think this is justice?" he had shouted, his voice echoing through the room. "You think this is about punishment? It's about power, and you're all just playing the same game." The judge, undeterred, dismissed the outburst as a moment of emotional volatility, but the public reaction was anything but silent. News of the incident spread rapidly, with social media platforms flooded with reactions from fans, critics, and legal experts. Some saw it as a justified outburst, a man finally confronting the system that had long ignored his crimes. Others viewed it as a sign of his instability, a man who had always been more interested in spectacle than accountability. The debate over Diddy's actions and the judge's response became a focal point for discussions about the death penalty, the role of the judiciary, and the limits of legal power. Yet the story of Diddy's case is not just about the courtroom drama. It is a reflection of a larger narrative, one that has played out in the shadows of his career. For years, Diddy had been a symbol of both the excesses and the dangers of the entertainment industry. His rise to fame was marked by a blend of charisma, talent, and a willingness to push boundaries. But his downfall had been equally dramatic, a series of scandals and legal battles that exposed the fragility of his empire. The death penalty was
eventually I've done what I set out to do, which was to redefine the universe. I've proven what I've set out to do, and that's why I have all the patents. Whether they evaluate it or not, that's up to them. But I've done the work and finished it. Now I can go on and do whatever else we need to do. Hi, everyone. My name is Terrence Howard. I'm an actor, but in the field of science also. So if you would like to connect with me, you can connect with...
was not just a punishment for his crimes. It was a reckoning for a man who had long operated outside the bounds of conventional morality. The judge's decision was not made in a vacuum. It was the result of years of legal proceedings, a process that had tested Diddy's resolve and his ability to navigate the system. His legal team had argued that the death penalty was an outdated and inhumane measure, but the court had rejected their appeals, citing the need for a deterrent. The judge's words had been clear. This case is not about mercy. It is about justice, and justice demands a reckoning. But for Diddy, the reckoning was personal. His entire life had been a series of calculated risks. A man who had always believed that he could outmaneuver the law, outlast his enemies, and emerge victorious. The death penalty was the first time he had faced a consequence that could not be negotiated, a punishment that would strip him of his power, his freedom, and his life. It was a moment that forced him to confront the reality of his actions, a reality that had been ignored for years. The aftermath of the incident was as chaotic as the moment itself. Diddy was taken into custody, his legal team scrambling to appeal the decision, and the public debate over the death penalty reached a fever pitch. Legal analysts debated whether the judge's actions were justified, while critics questioned the fairness of the verdict. Meanwhile, Diddy's supporters rallied behind him, arguing that the system had failed him, while his detractors saw it as a long overdue reckoning. But the story of Diddy's case is not just about the verdict or the outburst. It is a story of a man who had lived on the edge of legality for years, a man whose actions had consequences that extended far beyond the courtroom. The death penalty was not just a punishment for his crimes. It was a statement about the limits of his power, a reminder that no amount of wealth or influence could shield him from the consequences of his choices. As the legal battle continues, the question remains, will the
approach, and you threaten to punch them in the mouth, or threaten to knock their head off for talking to you like, or looking at you like you're a woman. You know, when you approach a real man about his masculinity, you're going to get a real reaction back. It's a difference when a guy walks in a room and when a man walks into a room. And a man don't take the same things that a guy will accept. So always be the man in the room. And that's always been my whole thing, and have lost businesses because I don't bend over in that way. I don't compromise. I don't play gay roles. I don't kiss a man. I don't do that shit because the man card means everything.
I had no idea we're going to go this direction with the podcast. This is absolute. But listen, we've talked about it. We've had a lot of the guys on to talk about this stuff. Are you done with Hollywood because of this specific reason?
I'm still working. I still, I haven't made the money necessary to do all of the other stuff. So I still have to go and do the chitlin circuit. I still have to do the job that I need to. But
the system that once protected Diddy finally bring him to justice, or will he find a way to escape the consequences of his actions once again? The answer may not be clear, but one thing is certain. The moment he turned on the judge will be remembered as a turning point in his story, a moment that forced him to confront the reality of the life he had built on the backs of others. For now, Courtroom remains a place of tension, a stage where the lines between law and power are blurred. Diddy's outburst may have been a moment of chaos, but it is also a reminder that the legal system is not infallible, and that even the most powerful figures can face the consequences of their actions. As the story unfolds, one thing is clear: the battle for justice is far from over, and the world will be watching to see what happens next. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Diddy's controversial legal battle, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. Stay tuned for more breaking news and in-depth analysis as this story continues to unfold. The incident that unfolded in the courtroom last month has become a focal point for discussions about the intersection of celebrity influence, judicial impartiality, and the ethical responsibilities of legal institutions. At its core, the event highlights the complex dynamics that arise when public figures, whose lives are often scrutinized under a magnifying glass, find themselves embroiled in legal proceedings. The situation, while still unfolding in full detail, has already sparked widespread conversations about how power, reputation, and public perception can shape the trajectory of justice. For many, the case represents a broader reckoning with the role of celebrities in society, particularly their ability to sway public opinion, and in some cases influence the very systems meant to uphold fairness and accountability. Yet it also raises critical questions about the vulnerabilities of the legal process itself, particularly when it comes to protecting those who are tasked with upholding the law. The tension between these forces,
if I lose my integrity, you got to go in as a principal. And what we were brought in here as men. We produce 1,500 sperm per heartbeat for a reason, because the aggression is necessary. You don't trade that in, no matter what.
Did you ever have the opportunity where you got invited and you said no to it?
Hell yeah.
What was the consequences when you said no?
Puffy invited me for weeks, asking me to come and teach him how to, wanted me to be his acting coach for a while. Go there and he's sitting around just looking. I'm like, okay, what's the material you want to work on? He's just looking at me. Then next thing you know, okay, hey, will you help me? I want to hear your music. So I come over there and I play the music. And he's sitting there just looking at me, like waiting. Okay. So then my assistant was like, he wants to hang out with you next week. And I was like, for what? He's like, I think he's trying to fuck you. That's what my assistant said. And I was like, oh, okay. Now I get it. So now no more communication. Now you know to be hands-off with somebody. A number of producers coming to make the
celebrity power and judicial integrity has become a defining thread in the narratives, one that continues to unfold with each new development. The incident in question centers on a high-profile legal case involving a public figure whose name has become synonymous with both cultural influence and controversy. While the specifics of the case remain shrouded in detail, the broader implications are already being dissected by legal analysts, media outlets, and everyday observers. What is clear, however, is that the case has brought to light the ways in which the legal system is not immune to the pressures of public scrutiny. The presence of a celebrity in a courtroom, particularly one whose actions have been the subject of intense public debate, can create an environment where the lines between personal, reputation, and legal proceedings blur. This is not a new phenomenon. Throughout history, public figures have often found themselves at the center of legal battles that extend far beyond the confines of the courtroom, but the scale and intensity of the scrutiny in this case have amplified the stakes, forcing a reckoning with how the legal system navigates the dual challenges of impartiality and public perception. At the heart of the debate lies the question of how judicial impartiality can be maintained in the face of overwhelming public attention. Courts are meant to be neutral spaces where the law is applied without bias, yet the presence of a celebrity defendant or plaintiff can introduce complexities that challenge this ideal. The legal system, by its very nature, is designed to operate independently of public opinion, but in cases involving high-profile individuals, the line between the two can become increasingly difficult to draw. This is not to suggest that the legal process is inherently biased, but rather that the weight of public expectation can create an atmosphere where the pursuit of justice is complicated by the need to maintain a semblance of fairness in the eyes of the public. The incident in question has brought this tension into sharp focus, prompting discussions about whether
Man, I mean, one of the things you're seeing, you went to a whole different place.
Sorry.
No, I get it. So you see some guys struggling with that. You see Bieber struggling with that. You see some of these guys struggling with that.
They can't get it out of their head. They can't get it out of their head. The things that they did, no matter how they did it, whether they were drunk or high or whatever, you gave up your man card. You need therapy. And that's the thing that hurts them the most. And so they end up on drugs, end up every way to try and get rid of any principles there are. And that's what the business does. And the women that trade their bodies to go and get the role, they get to the point where they have their Oscar, they have their money, but they don't have their dream. They don't have the soul that they started with. So it's like achieving don't mean anything. If I get all the Nobel Prizes from doing all of this, but in the process I have to trade out all of my integrity to do it so that they can stay in place, what benefit is that?
The legal system is equipped to handle cases where the outcome may be perceived as influenced by factors beyond the law itself. One of the most striking aspects of the case is the way in which it has exposed the vulnerabilities of courtroom safety protocols. Judicial officers, by virtue of their role, are entrusted with upholding the rule of law, but they are also human beings who can be affected by the pressures of public attention. The incident has sparked debates about the ethical responsibilities of legal institutions to protect these individuals from personal attacks, both in and out of the courtroom. While the legal system has long recognized the need for security measures to protect witnesses, jurors, and other participants, the case has highlighted the gaps in these protocols when it comes to the safety of judicial officers themselves. The idea that a public figure could be embroiled in a situation where their actions or statements could be interpreted as a threat to the integrity of the legal process is a sobering reminder of the challenges faced by those in positions of authority. The ethical responsibilities of legal institutions to safeguard judicial officers extend beyond physical security. They also encompass the broader duty to ensure that the legal process remains free from undue influence, whether from celebrity status, political pressure, or public sentiment. The incident has raised questions about how legal systems can balance the need for transparency with the imperative to maintain the impartiality of the judiciary. In an age where public opinion can shift rapidly and media coverage can shape the narrative of a case, the legal system must navigate a delicate tightrope between accountability and fairness. The case has underscored the importance of having robust mechanisms in place to protect judicial officers from both direct and indirect forms of harassment or intimidation, ensuring that their ability to perform their duties is not compromised by external pressures. The broader implications of the case extend beyond the courtroom, touching on the
You give up that right for anything, for fear of being hurt, fear of somebody doing something, for wanting to gain something. When you give up that man card right, you lose some spiritual energy that has always been pushing through. Like if a woman gives up her womanly right of being a mother and taking care of her family and do all those things, when you give up those things, but when you give up your manhood, I've never seen somebody recover from it. That was all the people that went to the puffy parties. That was all the people that did all those things thinking that there was never going to be a consequence for what they were doing. Got punked out and pimped out by some greater desire. You shouldn't have a greater desire than being a man. So I believe that's a big problem with a lot of the actors out there because they get fluid. And next thing you know, once you go fluid, it's gone. You don't have any foundation to pull yourself back from. So maintain your man card, no matter what.
Larger conversation about the role of celebrities in society. Pop figures, by virtue of their influence, often find themselves at the center of cultural and political debates, and their legal actions can have far-reaching consequences. The incident has reignited discussions about the responsibilities that come with fame, particularly in cases where the legal system is called upon to address the actions of those who have already been subject to intense public scrutiny. This raises the question of whether the legal system should be held to a higher standard when dealing with high-profile individuals, or whether the principles of justice should remain consistent, regardless of the status of those involved. The answer to this question is not straightforward, but it is clear that the case has brought these issues to the forefront of public discourse. As the case continues to unfold, it is essential to consider the broader context in which it is taking place. Legal systems around the world operate within frameworks that are designed to ensure fairness, transparency, and accountability, but they are not immune to the challenges posed by high-profile cases. The incident has demonstrated that the legal process is not a vacuum, but rather a space that is deeply influenced by the cultural, social, and political forces that surround it. This is not to say that the legal system is flawed, but rather that it exists within a larger ecosystem where the interplay between power, reputation, and justice is an ongoing negotiation. The case has provided a rare opportunity to examine how these forces interact and how they can shape the outcomes of legal proceedings. The debate surrounding the incident also highlights the importance of public awareness and engagement with the legal process. In an era where information is readily available and public, opinion opinion can be shaped by a multitude of sources. It is crucial for individuals to approach legal cases with a critical and informed perspective. This means recognizing that while celebrities may have a significant cultural impact, their legal proceedings should be evaluated based on the principle.
You know, there's a short life in
why do you think that is? What the creative side is?
Well, because losing out money, you got to take drugs. You're going through so much shit to try and deal with life. You are literally, it's an unhealthy space. And so eventually you're going to go too far, you know? Who knows what happened to Philip? Who knows what he had to do in order to get to where he was at? There's a lot of things that people do that end up sitting and they can't get over it. And they got to keep getting high, hoping to get it out of their head. You know, but when you lose your man card, that's the only thing I can think of. You lose your damn man card.
What is that? What do you mean by that?
You give up your ability, your right to being a man. A man don't take it, a man gives it. So when you give up that man card, you don't get that back.
Are you saying what I think you're saying?
No, I'm saying what I'm saying. You don't get that back. You come into this world as a man one time.
Of justice rather than the narratives that may be amplified by media or public sentiment. The case has served as a reminder that the legal system, while not perfect, is a vital institution that must be protected from the erosion of its integrity by external pressures. As the legal process continues to unfold, it is important to remember that the ultimate goal of any courtroom is to ensure that justice is served in a manner that is fair, impartial, and grounded in the rule of law. The incident has brought to light the challenges that come with high-profile cases, but it has also underscored the resilience of the legal system in the face of these challenges. The debates that have emerged from the case are not just about the specific circumstances of the legal proceedings, but also about the broader principles that underpin the administration of justice. These principles must be safeguarded, not only for the individuals involved in the case, but for the integrity of the legal system as a whole. In conclusion, the incident has sparked a necessary and important conversation about the role of celebrities in the legal system, the responsibilities of legal institutions to protect judicial officers, and the broader implications of high-profile cases on the administration of justice. While the details of the case may still be evolving, the discussions it has generated are already shaping the way in which society thinks about the intersection of power, influence, and the rule of law. As the legal process continues, it is essential to remain engaged, informed, and committed to the principles that make the legal system a cornerstone of democratic society. For those who are interested in following the developments in this case and similar legal matters, staying informed is not just a choice, it is a responsibility. If you found this discussion thought-provoking, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis and insights into the legal, cultural, and societal issues that shape our world. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the stories that matter.
Party. Britney Spears was at that birthday party, and they were all brought by Diddy. She was asked about her financial situation around that time, and she said essentially she was doing well. She was, modeling. She was doing other things, and then they kind of touched base a little bit about her prior relationship even before Diddy, and that was with a producer named Ryan Leslie. And around this time frame, because Cassie was still in a relationship with Ryan, at this time the defense was trying to paint it as, when you had met Ryan, he was 10 years older than you at this point of time. And I had kind of looked it up. Diddy and Ryan Leslie aren't necessarily close in age. I think Ryan Leslie's still in his mid-40s, whereas Diddy's in his mid-50s. So there's a little bit there, but I could kind of see where the defense was trying to go and try to paint it as that you kind of get with older producers, with older men that could possibly kind of help you with your career. Then we saw an email. I'm nervous. I'm just the girlfriend that you get your fantasies off with, and that I just don't get that other part. And then she wrote ... anymore, at least. And she kind of, at least to me and my perspective, appeared a little apprehensive about doing these freak-offs. She was asked by the defense, do you have a fear that you guys wouldn't go public, you guys being Cassie and Diddy? And she said, I guess she thought about this. Again, this is around that 2009 time frame when the two were still kind of under wraps there. But she said that the freak-offs were kind of an integral part of her relationship, and that essentially she just wanted more. There was a part where they had talked about her 21st birthday. Her 21st birthday is pretty important because that was the first time the two had kissed. That's the first time that she had kissed Diddy, because remember, she had met him 2 years prior to that time. She said that this was again at her birthday. Big names, like a name that we had seen in the People and Places list from jury selection. Dallas Austin was at high. And then Cassie responded, "You hungry, Pop Pop?" You know, and so I think what the defense was trying to do, at least with these initial messages, is just kind of show that there was love and there was affection there. But just think about these time frames and these dates. This was around the time that the two had first started dating, and I felt like it kind of played into what she had said under her direct testimony, that she did care about Diddy, that she